Today, I'm pleased to have a conversation with a legend, Pierre Mitchell. Where do you see AI today in terms of how far it's come along in procurement technology?
On this episode of Executive Edge, Greg welcomes Pierre Mitchell, procurement technology pioneer.
Pierre unpacks the evolving role of AI in procurement, shares lessons from decades of shaping the tech landscape, and explains why the future of procurement lies in mastering both data and decision-making.
There's one myth which is like, oh, Gen AI is going to come and agents are just going to replace everybody and replace SaaS. That is not really going to happen because, first of all, agents are SaaS. Two, agents help you improve your enterprise SaaS landscape. AI is not going to just replace SaaS. It's also not going to just replace people, but certainly that thing about it won't replace you, but the person using AI is certainly going to maybe replace you or at least be more competitive. We're at the point already where the biggest constraint is no longer the technology. It's actually our thinking and actually our proclivity to actually use these tools.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Executive Edge podcast. My name is Greg Anderson, and today I'm pleased to have a conversation about AI and the future of procurement with a legend in the analyst community in procurement technology, Pierre Mitchell, who's the Chief Research Officer at Spend Matters, which is now part of the Hackett Group. Pierre, great to have you here today. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to our conversation. Can you just give the audience here a little bit of your background? I think you've got incredible credentials in the space in which you operate. So I'd love to hear about your career and what led you to become an analyst.
Right. Well, I'm bound to disappoint now. Well, I subscribe to the theory of now that it works in practice, let's see if it works in theory. And my, my background started out as an industrial engineer. It's like for the engineers who couldn't decide or couldn't make it as real engineers. I don't know, but kind of got into supply chain, designing custom, almost MRP-like systems with these crazy things called 4GL relational databases. And so, we're going back to kind of the late 80s. Actually did some stuff in AI back in the day, old AI, expert systems and AI programming, things like that. But anyway, I had a real job in supply chain, worked for EG&G and Timberland and did a lot of, supply chain systems, finance scheduling, things like that. And then did kind of 3 tours of duty on the consulting side to kind of age in dog years, but also just get a lot of experience, right? Kind of implementing supply chain and MRP, which became ERP and, et cetera.
So I think if I can summarize that answer, I'd say we're still in the early innings, I think, in procurement, right? Procurement traditionally is a bit of a laggard in technology adoption, as you pointed out. So let's go into sort of what's the impact today and do a little reality check, if you will. As far as tangible, high impact AI applications that you've seen in procurement, are there any out there where you say, okay, yeah, that's AI, that is working, that is saving man hours, whatever it is.
Right.
It's a true example of AI at work.
Where there's a lot of the impact, where there's a lot of the action that generates a lot of value is one, contracts. So this ability of Gen AI to speak multiple languages. That language called legalese is certainly an important language, right? So that you need to be able to to speak, and taking your existing contract portfolio and being able to and some of the older AI can help with this too, but basically from that be able to understand, not just where your contracts are, but where are there risks in the contracts? Where are your contracts silent? What are your upcoming renewals that you need to worry about? What are some of the, just all the things related to, the commercial system of record that you have through contracts is certainly a great one. That's a good place to start. There's certainly a lot of impact, on just good old, like I was saying before, good old fashioned spend analytics, predictive analytics, around, on the forecasting side, supply chain risk. Anything that's like a big data problem, as well as anything that has a mass number of stakeholders, either on kind of your business stakeholder side, which is like that area of intake management. Let's get a common choke point and form for everybody to engage with procurement. So it's kind of like the CRM of procurement. How do we, support our stakeholders? Well, that piece requires can use some AI around policies and guided buying. And guided buying is a term I actually invented coined back in 2005. And now we're actually starting to have the technology to do it versus, smart forms are really dumb forms, these kind of catalogs anyway. But so I think that's kind of like analytically focused, anything involving contracts, anything involving risk, which isn't the easiest ROI thing, but it's certainly strategic, right? As well as just anything that touches mass stakeholders where you can, automate a lot of the self-service interaction, either with the stakeholders on the intake side or with suppliers on the supplier portal side, because that's the shantytown portals that we erect for the poor suppliers, whether it's through a network or, a la carte, it's still a bit of a disaster mess right now, right? So the more in which we can, make that more, have agents help the suppliers do more of that, get more self-service. That's a good thing right now.
Yeah, thanks. So there's suppliers that they're applauding you for that because they're often overlooked in any technology. I understand where you're going there. So it sounds like, okay, so I hear data retrieval, contract summarizations, maybe helping to draft RFQs, right? So I should say, there are many valid use cases today. A lot of it is around efficiency and time savings, but also making sure that the policies are enforced and whatnot. So it's happening there.
Yeah,
And let's look at
and statement of work generating, and
right.
anything that's kind of, rather than me having to do it myself and either kind of reinvent the wheel or find the closest template, I can kind of generate it. But then I really, there needs to be that human in the loop. And whether you're training it or whether you're just kind of having it be a starting point,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that because, I'll just tell you, yeah. So I think that's a lot of that generative stuff, and the agents is kind of just a way to do that more at scale, in workflows. But yeah, it certainly helps productivity with sourcing folks, right? And there, it's not just, oh, it makes us more efficient and we just need less bodies, but it's like, oh no, it means you get to spend more time driving deals. It means your bogey for value creation is going to be higher. It means you're going to touch more spend. You're going to touch it more deeply. You're going to go after new value levers. You're going to, be able to deliver more with your stakeholders. It becomes, as I always say, kind of efficiency funds effectiveness, right? Because the biggest cost of procurement is the opportunity cost of you wasting your time on non-value added, crap on the transactional side, when you really need to be spending your time on driving more, value. So efficiency drives effectiveness to the tune of, whatever that procurement ROI metric is, right? 5x, 10x, 20x, depends on where you are, how good you are, right? But that's a pretty good ROI calculation. And if you can't come up with 5x, you're doing something wrong. And if there's a CFO that doesn't think that 5x is better than their cost of capital, then either they don't believe procurement, which is a bad thing, or it's a pretty good place to invest some money, right? Look at Goldrat and theory of constraints and where you invest your money, right? That's a good place to generate profit. So.
For sure. Yeah, no, great. So, I love the efficiency leads to effectiveness, right? And because what are you doing? You're taking away the tasks that really don't add a lot of value. They need to be done, but you can focus your time and brain power on more strategic activities. I'm going to give a shout out to my good friend Omer Abdullah, who like to say it's a combination of HI, human intelligence, plus AI. That's really how you need to look at this, right? It's like any tool, right? You need somebody that can write the prompts, somebody that can manage it, be that human in the loop, as you mentioned. So very important for that. So I know that whenever technology comes along, we tend to try to ram it into existing processes that we have. And, sometimes we're our own worst enemy. We don't really open our minds to the full possibilities of technology and what that could bring. So when you look out there at procurement teams, are they ready from an organizational point of view and also from a technical point of view, maybe, to leverage AI effectively, or what's missing most often when you're out there talking with clients about their strategies?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just a constant theme of doing more with less, and that means being able to drive more value, not just on the savings side, right, but also on all the other things that you can do in terms of risk reduction and top line benefits and things like that, as well as obviously driving more margin impact and cost impact and cash impact and things like that, right? So
Sure.
The challenge is that our business environment is getting ever more complicated, right? Especially with tariff du jour, the pandemic, just all these things that are happening. There's just a lot of, it's a VUCA world, that's out there, to coin the military, term, the variability, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And so it's like we're constantly reacting, and we're also reacting to constant stakeholder shifts that's going on in the business units or whatever. So just trying to keep up with that while trying to be more proactive, to be involved earlier, to bring new value to the table, new analytics, now bringing AI. So when now this, a new technology like AI and Gen AI, now agentic AI comes onto the scene, it's like, well, is this thing a net add or a net subtract? And it's so easy to just ignore it and be like, yeah, I'll get to it and learn more about it. But it's like that, to quote the old Rush song, and the quote of, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. So if you are not, sharpening your saw and really understanding just what the LLM chatbots can do, you're going to be at risk on how to prompt them and how to use them, and just make yourself personally more effective and productive, and just to understand what the technology does, and then learn how to build your own agents and just really start to get into the technology a bit more. You're going to fall behind. And this is not a space where you want to kind of fall behind. And it's also not a fad. I mean, this is not like, oh, blockchain, great, kind of cool transaction registries and, provenance, great. That's terrific, but not strategic.
So I think I take away from this, it's not going away.
Nope.
I think about this like the internet, right? I think I told you about a week ago that since the internet, this is the most exciting thing I've seen in terms of technology developments and the impact I believe it will have on business and people in general.
Totally.
I think you're saying here, hey, just start using it, get used to it, understand what it delivers. You'll get better at prompt writing. You'll figure out how to start applying it to your job, because it's not going to go away, and there's going to be an evolution of the way people use this technology. But embrace it, or you can quickly be left behind. Because the biggest difference I see between the internet and this generative AI, especially not just AI, but generative AI, is that it's really, really faster this time than it was in, say, late 90s, right, when the internet was really starting to come into focus in terms of how do you use it for business applications. So totally. I think this is a fast-moving train, and you got to hop on, or really you'll fall far behind fast, I believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the whole thing around agentic, right, and agents is basically every gorilla in the tech space and all the startups and all the old S2P players, everybody wants to own that kind of agentic orchestration layer, taking the LLMs and, baking that into your business processes and into your analytics, because they don't want to be below the line. They want to be above the line, right? And so, that basically means that every single tech vendor is focusing on this. So and the supply market is fragmented, but it's huge and growing, and it's all about how do you drive the value of these LLMs and of Gen AI into the business processes to add more value, and primarily that is happening through this agentic framework that is emerging. And we don't get too much into the rat hole inside the black box there, but absolutely, it is foundational. It is the biggest change that I've seen in my 25 years, kind of covering the procure tech space.
Great. Okay, so now I want to move into the vendor landscape, sort of where we are today. One, there was a lot of money went into the supply chain and procurement space, I would say. And I used to say, I remember when it was hard to raise money, right? Trying to run a software company and get funding. And it seemed like it was overfunded, right? There were almost too many choices out there. And now you've got all those choices. Many of them are still around. Some have gone out of business. Some have consolidated, right? Things that naturally happen in that world. But now you've got this AI element coming in. And so if you're out there buying technology, if you're part of the procurement team or the CPO, and you're out buying technology, how do you cut through the hype? How do you really find out where the value is and maybe pick the right horses at this point in the game?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one is, I mean, there's kind of like starting with your existing procure tech stack. And our old approach is just throwing apps at the problem, right? This is like Monty Python and the castles, right? We throw this castle there and it sank into the swamp. And then we throw another one. We had ERP, right? And then we had S2P suites, right? And then we had, best of breed. And now we're hooking them all together. And now, right? So we're just bolting on these things. And underneath the covers, they're all kind of similar data models. Now we're fragmenting all our data. Now we have 17 supplier masters, all over the place. And it's great. Now we got to throw another, information, MDM tool that sits on top of, these various tools. And that's just within source to pay. That's not even kind of across, the landscape when you get into enterprise risk or compliance or whatever, right? So when you start from kind of the traditional apps, right, they are all undergoing, and the vendors, they're all having to kind of retool their architectures and not just bolt, kind of the agents on top and whatnot. So a lot of times, a lot of this stuff is just going to show up, but you have to just be smart in how you buy some of this from the legacy tech vendors. Don't pay extra for all the token costs, unless there's really clear ROI. Work closely with IT, right, and all that. But on the other side is, I was saying before, great, if you have something like Copilot and you can like do an agent builder and just start getting familiar with the tools, it's fine to do that. But also just look around the enterprise as you're working with IT and with HR or marketing, if there are some or like analytics team or whatever, if there's stuff that's kind of happening, right, glom onto that for sure, and be able to see, great, how can I now apply that? And maybe we can get some folks together and work in a certain area. Maybe it's around supplier compliance, and how do we do supplier onboarding and certifications and bring some of the agentic stuff and have it work with, you may have heard around, orchestration, right? Intake management is certainly a process, right? Common way for stakeholders to engage with procurement. But orchestration is around kind of this coordination and workflow. And now we can agentize it. That's a great place to start. There's basically two ways to do transformation. There's this process-centric thing, and then there's kind of the analytics, right? Around spend analytics. And then you start branching off, right? Supplier and risk and contract and all these analytics, single pane of glass, look back down into the business. Where are the opportunities? And those things kind of work together. So it's kind of working with the business, doing a little organizational judo, right? Or Aikido, like wherever the momentum is going, you try to latch onto that and use that to kind of fund some stuff that you're doing in a particular area. And if you got a little bit of budget to kind of that you're maybe given to do something around agentic AI, great. Pilot with some small startup. Got to spend matters. We have just tons of insights on all the startups as well as what the traditional players are doing. That's kind of like our core business, but just get your hands dirty with it. Pilots are great, but before you scale, that's where you have to work hand in hand with IT. Do not ignore them, right? No shadow procurement, no shadow IT. Procurement and IT live like amazingly parallel lives, right? IT does digitization, procurement does externalization. You got to get those, you got to be buddy system there, right? To help each other and to help the business, right? And so I think that's a foundational thing, right? If you have that alignment, that helps a lot because now you can kind of get access to more of the goodies, right? If you're actually helping IT source some of these tools, right? You can kind of see all the stuff that's coming into the candy store. So you can kind of see some of those things that you can make use of. So there's a lot of on-ramps, right? I've just given you some examples here, but definitely keep IT and keep the supply market close at hand so you can figure out, when you can bring that to bear to deliver some value.
Yeah. So get some people together, make sure you've got a team looking at this and it's on the agenda, right? For tech selection, whether that's out of your COE or whatever.
Got to have a COE. You've got to have a procurement center of excellence. And I don't mean like the administrative group that counts up the savings for finance, right? But someone that's really doing the outside in market intelligence, right? That's doing training enablement and the digital COE. And that doesn't have to be some big thing if you're not a big company. It just means you have a single accountable, responsible person within procurement responsible for getting the IT infrastructure that you need to do your job. And you need to have the same thing over on the IT side as your lead IT procurement people. And you better have the buddy system between, IT and procurement, not just with the CPO and the CIO, but also kind of with the centers of excellence, and make sure everybody's aligned here with the projects that you're doing, your objectives, getting that aligned, and kind of working jointly on some of these things.
Great. Yeah, work together with IT. I think it's so important that partnership is there and that alignment is there to make anything like this successful. Obviously, given the deep reach into the data. So you talked about guided buying, and you coined the term. Let's give you mad props for that again. And you've also, so far, you've quoted Rush and you've referenced Monty Python. So I give you great credit for that as well. Thank you. Let's talk about autonomous procurement just for a second, because that's sort of the dream, right? And guided buying, it sort of steered you the right place to buy. It's a phenomenal term, by the way.
Right.
I thought it was, when you hear it, you know exactly what it is if you're in this world, right? Guide to the right supplier, so you buy on contract and ensure compliance, and you ensure that the category strategy plays out all the way at the point of purchase.
It's a co-pilot class solution, right? It's guiding you to the right place with a best practice process and workflow and system and all that stuff, right? But it's human in the loop, yeah.
Right. So can we take that human out in autonomous procurement? And I'm not talking about running MRP.
Yep.
That's been running for years.
Yep.
I'm talking about a machine making a decision without a person, at the very end there to say, wait a minute, before we say yes to this decision, right?
Sure.
I need to review it, right? Do you think it can happen, or is it already happening? And I don't know.
For sure. Absolutely. So I think one of the things is the term autonomous is an important term, because ultimately, if you think about what an agent is and what that means, it means you're given a piece of software, and these are pieces of software wrapped around LLMs, as much as we want to, personify them and turn them into humans. And I understand that, right? It's like they have skills, the kind of, whatever, they can kind of seem, human, like you train them, right? They're like they're like minions, right? It's like they're kind of human, but, they're kind of like bots. But there's a guy named Andrew Ng who's like, a big tech guru. And he says, you know what, the terminology has just kind of gone off the rails. Let's just say we have agentic AI systems, right, that have varying levels of autonomy. And the more autonomy it is that you have using agents, it just means the agents have more agency. They have more of the ability to do things themselves, even if it's just, let's say, a final kind of presenting you with some options, which you could argue, well, if you get numb to that and you're just constantly, like the rat hitting the lever, it's like, what good is that, right? But the term autonomous has been around for a long time, with straight up tech automation. The problem with the old, approaches is that as processes are not just, this is like, ISO, say what you do what you say. The processes are nice and documented. Stuff's changing all the time, right? So you have to be able to shape shift, the integrations and, things like that, with this workflow layer, just independent of, agentic AI. So to do it, but the problem is every time things change, then you got to manage all the integration, and all this stuff around orchestration really requires a lot of tight integration, as well as more and more it's becoming more agentic to make it more autonomous.
Right. Okay, shift gears once more. Let's look to the future. So we have a CPO. It's 2025. Still got 6 months to go. I think we just hit the halfway point in the year a couple of days ago, right? So, what should the CPO be thinking about in 2025 and beyond? You've touched on having a COE to look at this. I think that's a super smart idea. There's got to be some central place for it, right? To come up with the strategy for any technology serving a function in the business. But what should they be thinking about in terms of the AI strategy? If it was you and you just got dropped in as a CPO somewhere, where do you begin?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. To net it out, I would say focus on the I. So focus on the I in IT, namely the information versus just the T and the tech apps and the process automation, right? Think about
Okay.
become the master of your own destiny around data management, and the analytics that use that data, and that use it, and also create it, right? Also the I in AI, so intelligence, right? And the whole thing around intelligence is, and the key to, like, if you're going to think about the future and AGI, and the key to AGI and where we're going for long term, with whenever the singularity comes or whatever, it's really around knowledge representation and knowledge modeling and management. And in fact, if you go back to 2001, and there was a paper written by a guy named Tim Berners-Lee, smart guy, basically invented the internet, and came up with things like HTTP and web and HTML and all these things. He wrote this article, and basically it was like, first it was around the semantics and the data and the information that eventually agents will need to communicate with each other. And we've gone right to the agents, right? And at the same time, what you really need is the information that you need to make the decisions to, be like, where should I focus my time? Or if you just think about, analytics, I would say the one single analytic to focus on is opportunity analytics, right? And this, right? Certainly within sourcing, but where, what's all the value that's out there hiding, that I don't have time to go through all these dashboards, right? And all this stuff, or just bring in a consultant all the time, serve up, where are the things where I have the most risks or where I have the most opportunities, stick it in that 2x2, right? And then I can kind of figure out, all right, what can I actually go after? And the more in which you have agentic capabilities or just execution and automation capabilities, that ability to execute becomes easier. So now things start shifting, right? So you can be like, oh, I can push that into wave one, wave two. So focus on the analytics to surface up opportunities. And to do those analytics means you need to get your house in order around the master data, suppliers, contracts, build out category taxonomy and knowledge, cost modeling, risk, what are the biggest risks, and all of these things interact with the rest of the business around what are the biggest risks and compliance requirements that we have, sustainability, ESG, all those things, right? So there's two design patterns to transformation. One is kind of layer the workflow on top, right? And of which, intake is a great piece, right? And the supplier portal is great for suppliers. The other is data and analytics. And data analytics are going to inform what's your biggest economic cost, go forward cost, the things where you can drive the most value to the business. That's a good place to start, right? So I would focus on the I and on the intelligence piece. And there's some interesting technology that is emerging in that space around. It's called, it's a data centric approach, data mesh, data products. I don't want to kind of send you folks down the rat hole, but this idea of using things called knowledge graphs, this ability to model your data and outside of the apps that you're buying to automate different processes. It's kind of like liberating your data and bringing that up, let's say, into a data lake, and then kind of the analytics wrapped around that. That whole analytics and intelligence piece is absolutely crucial, because otherwise you just have these, dumb agents and bots that are just trying to plug onto whatever you have and make that more efficient. But you're just making you're just putting lipstick on the little pigs and you're making the pigs run faster, but you're not saying, hey, why do I have all these old pigs here? I'm beating this analogy to death. Why don't I actually have a better, procure tech stack? And a way to do that is, independent of whatever tools you're using, make sure that the data that you have is high fidelity and giving you the insights that you need to go after these things. And by the way, as you go after them, then you can self-fund, replace out some of the old tooling, put in some of the new apps, that kind of stuff, right? So focus on the I, not the T. Focus on the I in IT, and focus on the I in AI, not just the the A part around artificial and agentic.
Yeah, coming back to that information, data, right? This is something we haven't talked about, but it's pretty obvious that if the underlying fuel, if you will, for agentic AI is the data, the veracity and accuracy and timeliness of that data is super critical, right? So I see a lot of the data what I'll call the data vendors out there who are cleaning up databases, enriching data, right, are really pushing that agenda. But I think they're right. You have to have clean data. And how do you keep it clean? How do you keep it from getting polluted again? Is there any thoughts you have just about how do you make sure your data is as good as it could possibly be, considering this is the real world and it's never going to be perfect?
Right, for sure. So let's talk about kind of just the basics of, you got a bunch of apps, and those apps are prosumers of data, right? They produce data and they consume data. And they produce a lot of crappy data. And if you haven't fixed the problem of, we're going to give end users commodity code drop downs that they can pick whatever the hell they want, and then you're like, well, why is my spend data all, why am I buying, I didn't know I was buying nuclear material. You're not. That was like your first drop down code or whatever. You had miscellaneous or other or 999. You've been in this game for a long time,
Yep.
right? It's like, you have got to put the controls, in place to make sure there is that data quality at the source. And this is where AI can help. If you go back to that whole guided buying thing 25 years ago, one of the technologies was real-time use cases was real-time auto classification of your spend at the time of need and requisitioning and POs and all that, so that we can actually guide people down the right paths based on the category of stuff that they're looking for, services that they're looking for. Genius, right? So, but that means real-time auto classification, right? And having that, fixing that data right at the source. There's a lot of myths right now. And like you're saying, right, there's a hype cycle that happens. And right now it's like you kind of have, and unfortunately it's like we've almost been conditioned to be like, oh, this is hype, it's going to go away, right? There's going to be a big hype and then it's going to drop off. And then we're going to get back to business as usual. Maybe a few things are going to change. And that's not really going to happen this time, because it is fundamentally kind of a shift as big as actually kind of the internet itself, and then kind of getting apps to be to SaaS, right, and then now to the agentic age. So there's one myth which is like, oh, Gen AI is gonna come and agents are just gonna replace everybody and replace SaaS, and that is not really going to happen, because first of all, agents are SaaS. Two, agents help you improve your enterprise SaaS landscape, as we've talked about. And also you just need to kind of get that house in order. And a lot of these agents, they're not, kind of SaaS apps. They're not like big persistent data model, kind of based applications that are your system of record, your system of kind of, analytics, your core workflows. They're kind of like augmenting that, right, and helping you make those more autonomous. So AI is not going to, just replace SaaS. It's also not going to just replace people, but certainly that thing about, it won't replace you, but the person using AI is certainly going to maybe replace you, or at least be more competitive, than you are. That is true. But at the same time, now there's this myth of kind of like, oh, agents are just, it's hype. It's going to go away. We don't want to let these things touch our systems. And the thing is that they are going to evolve. They are going to be more than just the simple use cases. They will add the knowledge and the ontologies, kind of the analytics and the data modeling. They will get better. And they're already kind of, honestly, we're at the point already where the biggest constraint is no longer the technology. It's actually our thinking and actually our proclivity to actually use these tools. So I would just challenge every listener out there, get out there and take one of the tools. And, for example, I was just doing, a couple of weeks ago, right? It was like, all right, I don't think it was ChatGPT or DeepSeek, I'm trying to remember, or Claude, I'm trying to remember, but it was like, what a best practice for a category strategy. Great. Give me a stakeholder interview guide for the things that I need from them to inform that. Great. Now do that and go out to a category called facilities management. Terrific. Who are the biggest players that are out there? Okay, now apply category strategy to that, and now give me a set of negotiation tactics to engage them based on the strategy that I've now determined I want to go for an integrated systems supplier. Terrific. Now take that, whatever, and then ultimately you can as you're doing those things, you're almost, there's an agentic feature where the tools are out there, they're gathering data, they're analyzing things, they're coming up with the strategy to help you come up with this stuff. They'll generate forms and inquiries and tables. You can come up with a category management application. You can just like auto gen that. Vibe coding is the term, but proceed with caution, right? But that ability, and then say, great, now load this into my sourcing tool, to kind of with optimized negotiation strategies. Yeah, it's going to hallucinate potentially some stuff. The intelligence won't be perfect because it's scraping a lot of mass data, but it is pretty scary, and sometimes scary good, as to how well it can do a lot of these things. And it's only continuing to get smarter. So you need to really understand what these things can do. So I don't want to go full Yoda here, but it's the challenge is within yourself, and change how you think more than not. So that is that myth. Like, oh, this is just a fad, and the stuff's going to go away. It's not going away. It's so you better know how to master it.
No, so embrace it. Thank you, Yoda. I appreciate that. Hey, listen, I want to give you a chance to plug maybe some of your research. Where can our listeners on the pod, where can they dive deeper into your AI research at Spend Matters, which is now part of the Hackett Group?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think the easiest thing is you could just go to our site and just sign up for the newsletter. That's pretty easy. It's,
Okay.
in a lot of procurement folks, and for me, hey, if it's free, it's me, right? So, we don't spam you. I think, it's like, I think you can set the frequency on the newsletter subscription. And that gives you just kind of a roll up of the stuff that we write about. I mean, not, and most of it's all just available that you can get access to. There is stuff that is proprietary, that is the market intelligence on particular providers. So if you're going to be doing an RFI and you want to go out to market and you want to see how, whatever the S2P guys are doing versus some best of breeds and the AI, and then like our latest research on AI and some of these topics that we're, delving into, I think that's probably the easiest place to go. And we also have a bunch of free guides too, which are basically like kind of pick the area that you're interested, whether it's e-sourcing or spend analytics or supply chain risk or whatever it is. You can kind of contract management. You can dive in there and it'll basically be like, here's what it is. Here's the space. Here's what it's all about. Here are kind of the main features to look for. Here are some of the vendors in the space. So we, kind of show a little leg, give away, a certain amount of content and just get you educated on the space. So I would say that's probably the best place to go, is kind of to go to our guides section or just do the free newsletter sign on. But, obviously on LinkedIn, if you want to, connect with me or subscribe or follow or, any of that stuff, either me personally and the company. That's kind of the easiest thing to start with.
Awesome. No, I think you bring such a wealth of knowledge. Obviously, it was on display here. Pierre, you can go super deep on these subjects, and it's always great to talk to you and sort of understand what's happening. I think there's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty out there because things are changing so quickly. And I know some people that I talk to, they don't want to be left behind, but they also want to make sure they're not the pioneer. The plains are littered with a lot of dead pioneers, right? So they want to approach it the right way, and I think your guidance can help them approach it maybe the right way, the optimal way, and arrive at value faster without making too many mistakes. But I think, like anything, if you don't make any mistakes, you're probably not trying hard enough. And trying new things. And so I think if to the extent that there can be some controlled experiments and, guidelines and guardrails around this activity, I think people should just go for it, right? That's what it was coming through steady in your messaging.
Totally, man. Totally. If you want to go deep and having human in the loop, advisory and intelligence, feel free to reach out, right? That's right. I can be helpful. But for the rest, where you're just trying to get educated on this stuff, a lot of this stuff, honestly, I would just get your personal version of, Chat GPT, put on the, the voice mode. And, you don't have to have the voice mode. You can just, type or whatever. You're a good typer. But basically just ask you questions and be like, I don't get it, or how does this relate to this? Or I don't know, that seems like a little optimistic, what about blah, 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 right? And of course, these chatbots are hilarious. They're always anxious to please, right? They'll be like, "Oh, that's a great insight," right? So you can have these conversations. And honestly, I've been spending a lot of time, perhaps too much time, really having these conversations to just see how things are connecting. And I've learned a lot, and I'm pretty deep into it, right? So the more, I would just say, again, the only limitation is yourself. So just be curious and get out there and learn. And any questions that you have, don't be like, say, well, I can't be answered. No, just go talk to the chatbot and ask the hard questions, and get into it and just get smarter on it. And once you, that's half the battle, right? Once you get kind of smarter, then you can kind of figure out, what does it mean for me? What's in it for me, and then work with IT and your other colleagues at work to figure out, great, how can we maybe do this in a certain area XYZ in the business.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Pierre, for your time today. I appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners will get a lot out of this session, and it's great to have such an open conversation with you about this. Again, Pierre Mitchell, he's the Chief Research Officer at Spend Matters, which is now part of the Hackett Group. He's been covering procurement technology as long as procurement technology has been around. I think it's safe to say that. So he's really seen the advances that are out there, and it's great to have you on the show today. And all the best to you, Pierre. It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Really enjoyed it. I hope the listeners get some value from it. And it was just nice to connect with you again.
All right, thank you, man. Take care.
Yep. See ya.